For 4 years, I was the man who killed a 23-year-old kid on my own shift. Nobody ever asked me if it was true. They just stopped looking me in the eye. My old crew crossed the street when they saw me coming. My best friend of 20 years started calling less, and when he did call, his voice had that careful softness people use with something broken. Then the kid's widow handed me his old work jacket and asked me to help her clear out his things. And in the front pocket, I found the thing that undid everything I thought I knew about my own life. My name's Wade Halloran. I spent almost 30 years on offshore rigs in the Gulf, working my way up from roughneck to foreman, the guy who signs off on a crew's safety before they go out on the water. That's not just a job title. That's a promise you make with your name. These days, I work consulting jobs, safety audits on platforms I used to run outright. Other men's crews. I show up, I check their paperwork, I leave. Nobody there knows my history unless they go looking for it, and most of them don't bother. It's a smaller life than the one I built for myself, and for a long time I told myself that was fair. Punishment ought to shrink a man. Mine did. Danny Kowalski, everyone called him Dale, was my partner. We built our contracting company out of 2 busted-up barges and a bank loan neither of us could really afford. 20 years of that man's face across the table from me, 20 years of trusting his signature on paperwork I didn't have time to read twice. That trust is what got a kid named Danny Jr. killed. His father, Tom Castillo, was the closest thing I had to a brother. We came up together in the Army before either of us ever set foot on a rig. When his boy was looking for work, I brought him on myself. I looked Tom in the eye and told him, "He's with me. I'll watch him." 4 years ago, a valve failed on my shift. Danny Jr. didn't make it home. The official report said, equipment failure, standard wear, nobody's fault. But somebody had to answer for a dead kid. It wasn't going to be nobody. It was going to be me. I lost my supervisor's license. I lost the company's trust. Tom stopped answering my calls, and I told myself I deserved that silence. The night before it happened, I'd signed off on the maintenance log without checking it myself. Dale had put it together. 20 years of trusting the man. Why would I start doubting him now? That's my real failure in all this, if you want to know the truth. Not the valve. The trust I handed away instead of doing my own job. 4 years later, Renee, Danny's widow, called me. She was finally selling the house, and she couldn't bring herself to go through his things alone. "I don't have anyone else who'd understand what these mean," she said, so I went. Guilt and grief have a way of making you say yes to things you're terrified of. We were in her garage going through boxes when I found his old work jacket at the bottom of a bin. I don't know why I checked the pockets. Force of habit, maybe? My hand closed around a folded, crumpled piece of paper. It was a maintenance request. Danny Jr. had filed it 8 days before he died, flagging that exact valve. Across the bottom, in handwriting I recognized instantly after 20 years of watching it sign checks, one word: denied. Dale's initials underneath. Renee told me later that Danny always kept his own copy of anything he filed. He'd watched his father get stonewalled on paperwork more than once over the years. Forms that mysteriously vanished, requests nobody could find a record of. So the kid made a habit of it. Write it up, fold a copy, keep it close. He didn't trust the system to remember what he'd asked for. Turns out, he was right not to. On the back of that same page, in pencil, he'd scratched out a little list. Nothing important. A new rod and reel for his dad's birthday, a number he was saving toward. He was 23 years old, thinking about a birthday present 8 days before somebody decided his warning wasn't worth the cost of a repair. That's the part that put me on the floor of that garage, not the word denied. The list did it. I didn't say anything to Renee. I told her I hadn't found anything, folded the paper into my jacket, and drove home in a silence I can't fully describe to you. I spent that whole night trying to convince myself it meant nothing. Maybe it was a different valve. Maybe Dale had a reason. 20 years of friendship doesn't just evaporate because of one piece of paper. Except it does. It absolutely does, once you let yourself really look at it. There was an old-timer on our crew, Walt, who'd worked maintenance longer than anyone. I tracked him down at a bar he still drank at. That request was real, Wade, he told me, not meeting my eyes. I remember the kid filing it. Dale killed it personal. Why didn't you say something? 4 years, Walt. He went quiet for a long moment. Dale kept me on the books after I should have retired. Paid me extra, off record, to keep my mouth shut about a few things. I'm not proud of it. 20 years of maintenance logs, and the one honest thing this man ever handed me came wrapped in a bribe he'd been taking the whole time. I put money down for my beer and stood up. Get out of my sight, Walt. I walked out of that bar and didn't look back. I understood, in that moment, that I couldn't trust a single person who'd been anywhere near this company, including, maybe, myself. 3 weeks passed. I barely slept through any of them. One night I drove by the old company office, telling myself I just wanted to see the place again. Through the lit window of Dale's office, I saw him alone, feeding folder after folder into a shredder. Hours of paperwork, gone in seconds, right in front of me. I couldn't go in. I had no authority left, nothing but a piece of paper in my jacket. Whatever I still need, I need it now. The next morning, I drove straight to Tom's. I made it as far as his porch. When he opened the door, my nerve went out completely. Just wanted to see how you're doing, I said, like a coward, and left with the paper still folded in my jacket, still unsaid. A few days later, digging through files on an old company laptop nobody had ever come to collect after everything happened, I found something worse than denial. Messages between Dale and a buyer, dated before the accident. Dale negotiating a sale of the company, specifically noting that fixing the valve system would cut into the number he wanted to walk away with. He didn't just deny a repair request out of laziness. He calculated it. A kid's life against a number on a spreadsheet, and the number won. I sat with that laptop open for over an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, hollowed out, understanding for the first time exactly what kind of man I'd called my best friend for 20 years. A few days before all that, Dale had actually shown up at my place uninvited, the way he used to back when we were still close. He saw an old photo on my shelf, the two of us and Tom on a fishing trip, 20 years younger, grinning like idiots. He went quiet looking at it. I miss those days, Wade. I mean that, he said. And for 1 second, just one, I believed him. Whatever this man had become, some part of him remembered being my friend. I think about that second a lot now. It's the only reason the next part hurt as much as it did. Dale found out I was asking questions. I made the mistake of calling our old accountant for records, not realizing Dale still had him on retainer. 2 days later, he showed up at my door again, smiling like nothing was wrong. Should have just called me, Wade. We're friends. We were, I said. His smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Careful what you go stirring up. Be ashamed to lose the rest. I had him by the collar before I even decided to move. And then I let him go. Slow. You're not worth losing anything else over, I told him. Not yet. He left without another word, and for the first time in 20 years, I watched him walk away, actually afraid of me. That same week, Tom showed up at my door, something he hadn't done in 4 years. Danny called me the night before, he said, before I could even speak. Told me he wrote up a report on a valve, told me it got shot down. His voice cracked. I let my own boy go out on that shift the next day. I couldn't live with you knowing I could have kept him home and didn't. 4 years of silence, and it was never about blaming me at all. It was a father who couldn't forgive himself. We stood on my porch and cried like we hadn't let ourselves do in 4 years. I finally told Renee everything. The jacket, the paper, all of it, my own cowardice included. She didn't look surprised. She walked to a closet and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of internal emails, records she'd been quietly gathering through her lawyer for almost a year. I couldn't get everything, she said. They kept stonewalling my requests. I'm just his widow. I don't have a badge and nobody has to answer me. You still had that old laptop sitting in your garage that nobody ever asked back for. It was always going to be easier for you to find a way in than me. There wasn't any anger in it, just fact, laid out plain, the way she'd probably rehearsed saying it to herself 100 times before I ever showed up on her porch. I sat there, ashamed of how long it took me to become someone she could trust with this. 2 nights before the hearing, someone knocked on Renee's door. It was Walt, holding a thin folder against his chest like it weighed more than it looked. "I still had this from when I worked maintenance," he said, not stepping inside, not asking to. "Schedule records. Should have handed it over 4 years ago." He held it out to her, hands not quite steady. "I want this one to be honest. That's all." Renee took it without a word. Walt turned and walked back to his truck before either of us could say anything else. He didn't ask for thanks. I don't think he would have known what to do with it if we'd offered. The hearing came fast after that. I hadn't slept more than a few hours a night in 3 weeks, and I could feel it in my hands. They wouldn't sit still on the table in front of me, no matter how hard I pressed them flat. Dale walked in looking untouchable, like a man who still believed his name meant something. I laid the maintenance request on the table. Then, the emails. The room went quiet in that specific way rooms go quiet right before everything changes. Dale didn't fold right away. He turned toward me instead. "He signed that log without even reading it," he told the panel, pointing at me. "Ask him. Ask Wade if he checked a single line himself before he put his name on it." For a second, nobody said anything, and I felt the floor go out from under me. Because it was true, and everyone in that room could see it was true on my face. Then Walt's folder went on the table. Then Renee's copies. The timeline lined up in a way no amount of pointing could undo. Dale's initials, Dale's denial, Dale's emails about the sale, dated before any of it happened. I watched something in him give out, slowly, not all at once. His hands stopped moving first. Then his voice lost its practiced calm, dropped lower, quieter, almost like he was talking to himself instead of the panel. 20 years I did the paperwork," he said. "You shook hands, got your name in the paper. Not me." A pause. "I built that company too, Wade." It wasn't really about the sale price at all in the end. It was 2 decades of feeling smaller than the man across the table and 1 bad year where he finally saw a way to even the score. Before they let him out, Renee stood up. The room stared, but she looked only at Dale. "His name was Danny," she said, steady as stone. "Say it." Dale said nothing. They walked him out in handcuffs while 23-year-old Danny's name still hung in that silent room. Later, Tom, Renee, and I sat together for the first time without a single lie left between us. Tom told a story about Danny as a kid, always saying 5 more minutes before he'd leave anything. The dinner table, the dock, a video game. Turned out, he'd said the exact same thing to Walt the week before the accident. "Give me 5 more minutes, I want to check that valve again." He never got them. I used to wear my father's old watch every single day, and since I was young enough to think it made me the kind of man he was. That night, for the first time in years, I took it off and put it in my pocket instead of my wrist. Renee noticed. "Why now?" "Because I don't need it to prove I'm worth something anymore," I told her. The company lost its license within the year and shut down for good. Most of the crew found work on other rigs across the Gulf. The old accountant testified against Dale in the end. It wasn't much, but it was as close to making it right as a man in his position could manage. I saw Walt once more, outside the courthouse the day Dale was sentenced. I put my hand out. He shook it. Neither of us said a word. There wasn't much left to say after that folder. Dale filed an appeal. It was denied 8 months later. I still check every valve myself now. Every shift, every time, no exceptions. Some of the younger guys think I'm paranoid. Let them. Maybe that never goes away. Maybe it shouldn't. But for the first time in 4 years, I sleep the whole night through. Last week, I finally opened the box in my closet I'd kept sealed since the accident. My old hard hat, the one I wore the day it happened. I hadn't touched it in 4 years. I turned it over in my hands for a long time, running my thumb along the scuff marks, half expecting it to feel like picking up something that belonged to a different man. It didn't. I put it on, and I walked out the door. If someone you trusted ever made you carry blame that was never yours, hear this. Staying quiet doesn't make you weak. It just means you were waiting for your moment. Has someone close to you ever let you take the fall for something that wasn't your fault? Tell me in the comments. The real story, not the short version. Somebody reading through them tonight needs to know they're not the only one. If this one hit you, there's another story on this channel about a man who blamed the wrong friend for 9 years. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.